the statistics that I've got at the beginning of the film, it says it's 6% or 8%. It's actually lower than that. It's got massively lower. It's probably around 3 or 4%. Working class people working in film and TV in 2024.
So with this documentary, what would be your ideal outcome for this? What would, if you could cherry pick something, what would be the ideal outcome for you with this project?
Great question. There's so many. I suppose the outcome would be.
Hi Mark, thanks for joining me today.
Hi Steve, you're very welcome.
Appreciate it. The funny thing is we've actually never, beyond a few emails, we've actually never met. This is the first time of us actually meeting. So this is interesting and, a first for me as well,
Yeah, I mean, this is how the world is running now, isn't it? Hybrid meetings.
Yes, exactly. Obviously, the nature of today of what I wanted to talk about was your documentary, Quiet on Set, the class division in the film industry, which I'm massively keen to get to, and that's obviously, as I say, the nature of this today. But I just thought before that maybe we could just touch on a few things about yourself. So, from what I understand, you've been involved with filmmaking for over 20 years by the looks of things.
Yeah, 25 years.
Yeah, so is that what you started off in Scotland and then came down to London to start making films, or how did that work?
I always wanted to get into filmmaking in Scotland, but for some reason, just the education wasn't there, the support wasn't there, and I just felt the careers advice, they just didn't give good careers advice. So I always wanted to be a filmmaker. So it wasn't until I moved down to London and I made my first film, Hobgoblin, which got into the Raindance Film Festival in 1999, 2000. That's really my entry point into filmmaking.
So where did it come from, or is it, just sort of a natural thing like all us filmmakers, just passionate about cinema from a kid, or is, and then just wanting to get involved with it from that? I mean, is it kind of the similar for you as well?
Well, yeah, I went to Aberdeen College and I did a media course there, and that's kind of where my early filmmaking days started. I started to cut videos on VHS. Now I'm really showing my age, and yeah, but it didn't feel like it was a viable route for me to go for whatever reason. I felt there was going to be, you know, gates to get through, doors to get through, and it wasn't until I sort of moved down to London and started to get into it. I moved in the late 90s and I had to take a serious job, obviously, do security work, do, door work, do fitness work, whatever job I could get my hands on, I did that. And behind me in the background was my filmmaking dream was always to make films. And I suppose I got obsessed with filmmaking. When my late dad was still alive, he was obsessed with Clint Eastwood movies and John Wayne, and that's kind of where I started to learn about movies, so to speak.
So what were your early films like that you made, your first few shorts and things? What kind of films was you making back then?
It's so funny because I started off in horror films, and my late stepdad, he sort of wrote books and he wrote horror books, and we were obsessed with films. And he says, "Oh, I think you should do a film." And I was like, "Yeah, have you got a story?" And he wrote the script for me, and he didn't work in the film industry at all. So I took the script and I loved it, and that became Hobgoblin, and that was screened at the Raindance Film Festival, which I thought was unbelievable because it was quite rough, to be honest with you. But it was a weird experience because I was sitting in the cinema watching my film, and the Blair Witch Project guys were sitting next to me watching my film, and I was watching the Blair Witch. So I felt a little bit, how should I say, a bit fake about, like I was an imposter or something. I shouldn't be there because their film looked beautiful and the sound was amazing. And here's my DV short horror film, and it was very rough, and the audio was not the best. Yeah, I realized that horror films are really difficult to pull off unless you have good prosthetic effects and good blood, as they say in the business, it just doesn't work. And I kind of got into more serious short films because I couldn't afford to go to film school. I met a guy on my first film, Simon, and we worked as runners on a London film school, project, and it was a horrible experience. And he became my sound man on my first film, and then I started to continue making films, and I just kind of explored working with actors, working with crew. Really enjoyed doing the stories. I tried to do my own stuff, but it was mainly trying to get more stories, with my stepdad who wanted to help me into the business, even though he didn't work in the business, but he was a very good storyteller. And then I made a few documentaries along the way. One about the Amiga computer, which is an old classic computer, which is I think it's on YouTube. And then I made a film, which is probably my biggest film before all the features that I'm doing now, and it was about the men and women that work in burlesque in the UK. And it was meant to be a much bigger film, but unfortunately it changed with one of the ladies whose business kind of folded in Spain, and I had to kind of find another thread to go for. And that was probably my biggest documentary, because it was 45 minutes long. It could have been a feature, and it wasn't a feature. But I had high hopes for that, and it only got into one festival, in the Portobello Film Festival in London.
So from a filmmaking point of view, with yourself, you've mentioned that you didn't go to film school and stuff like that, so you're very much a self-taught filmmaker. Back then, when you were starting to first put your films together and you was navigating your way through this whole thing, what were the things that you felt, looking back, that you was figuring out pretty quickly from a filmmaking perspective?
Well, it's funny you should say that. In my late 20s, when I got into filmmaking, it didn't dawn on me that there was a kind of social circle, a sort of class circle. And I was naive, obviously. I thought, right, no one's going to stop me doing what I want to do. I'm going to still make films. But I suppose it was because I was young and I was kind of raw and making films. But as I started trying to get my films funded, and all the rejections I got, no grants, no funding from any of the big organizations, I just felt there were a lot of barriers put in place. So there was really no other way. But I definitely felt that you have to have connections in this business. And it obviously came to fruition the last 4 years, I think 4 or 5 years, when I got into features. All my films are personal, and some are better than others, and some I'm not very happy with. But I think it's the subject matter. I think I should have gone political years ago. I'm very passionate about highlighting issues, and this is something that I wanted to highlight a few years ago. To do with the classism in the film and TV industry. And it was a friend of mine who said, are you going to do that film? And I said, well, I don't know, because I felt like I needed a break, because I've made 5-6 films consistently within 4 or 5 years, and I haven't had a break really. And even with this one that I've just finished or finishing, it's just been non-stop. But I've had a lot of massive doors slammed in my face while trying to get this thing finished. You'd be surprised how many people are supportive and how many people are not supportive. Hi, my name is Mark, and I'm a filmmaker. This is a documentary about class which continues to plague the film industry.
If you're looking for a middle-class point of view in the British film industry, it's extremely well represented, because there are 95% middle-class filmmakers, directors, actors out there, so that the working-class point of view is very minor. If Phoebe Waller-Bridger wakes up tomorrow and says, I'm going to be a director, hundreds of people are going to have their hands out with money for her to direct a film, even though she's never directed a film before. She's the right class, she's well known, she's connected.
for working class people in this industry, in all parts of this industry, and we're determined to keep holding that door open.
If we exclude people with that talent, we undermine ourselves, we undermine the great richness.
Class needs to work its way up. If you've got people in charge who have no personal experience of the stories they are telling.
I think it affects the country as a whole, and I think it's ingrained within society.
Those people are pretty much the bloody same. They're not people from Doncaster or Hull. They're usually people from Oxbridge.
The systems and the culture that is making it very difficult for people from these groups to get into the industry, that needs to shift.
I mean, how long would you say that it was rattling around in your head before you felt, well, actually, I want to, turn this is something I want to highlight for a documentary?
It was maybe 5 years ago, and one thing I forgot to mention was that I did drop out of filmmaking for 5 years, and I did get depressed, and I was down. And it was this same friend that said to me, he says, Mark, you need to get back to making films. And he was right. This thing, the one that I'm working on just now, it was always at the back of my mind that I need to talk about it, that I need to voice the issues in the industry. God knows there's issues in the industry, but this has been around for like decades and nobody seemed to want to talk about it. But I just felt, now is the time to talk about it, and here we are.
Would you say this is something that could ever change within the film industry? Like, it's been so like that for such a long time with how it's all structured and things. Do you think it's like a machine and a monster that is just too far down the road to be stopped or changed or turned around?
It's been like this for so long that people at the top don't want to rock the boat, because I approached a lot of people in the business, right? And a lot of them don't want to talk about it and they don't want to rock the boat, as they say. But luckily I've got allies like even BAFTA, Channel 4, who else is there? I've got TV companies, ITV, and they did. And I think, to me, that is a step forward. BBC Studios, they talk to me as well in the film. Again, I think it's really good if they talk about it. But, the way that I describe it, Steve, is I'm not trying to cause, I'm not trying to upset people. I'm not trying to cause a divide or anything like that. I just want a conversation. That's all I want. I want a conversation with all the organizations. They all talk together. Oh, yes, we've got a problem. Let's make it a bit more of a fair system for people from different backgrounds, as they like to label it in the film TV industry, low economic social backgrounds. They've got their fancy words for what they say for that.
So, you'd know more than me about this. Why do you think it is like this? Where does it come from? Or has it always been like this, or it goes back a lot further than me and you would sort of since me and you have been around, that's for sure. But where does this come from, and why do you think it is like this? Is that something you've come across while putting this documentary together?
Yeah, I hate to say this, but it's in every industry. So, and yes, it has been around for decades. Things were better in the 70s, 80s, 90s. It was starting to go downhill. So we had a lot of corruption in the film industry with the Film Council. What were they doing? They were taking the money and they were giving it to their mates, their middle class producer mates. So that company got disbanded. And there was many, many organizations like that in the film industry where people were, profiting from, getting the funding. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things that have happened in the industry. The reliance on the American Hollywood system has decimated our industry, unfortunately, because we've had contracts with American companies. And this is something that France hasn't done. France has rejected American influence. And the reason why I know all about this is because there was a book written about this. And I actually interviewed a guy in my second feature who talks about the death of the film industry. And that was in 2000. So it's been on the decline for a long time. Just because they're opening American studios in the UK doesn't mean that they're investing in the British film industry. Far from it.
Would you also say that the reason it's like it is because there's a lot of, say, you know, nepotism as well, where it's like a family thing, they just want to keep sort of, you know, they just want to pass it on to sort of generation, it's like a generations thing that they want to keep it inside that kind of little circle type of thing, which, you know, I can understand because you get that in all kinds of industries, you know. So, but would you say that's an element of it as well?
It's a massive element. It's actually covered in my film as well. I had a different title of the film previously, but I wanted to focus on the classism, but nepotism is touched upon. And yeah, it is relevant. And yeah, I've been to a lot of film festivals and I've met a lot of people and I've seen reasons why films get funded. And yeah, there is a massive amount of nepotism. And some people like to talk about it and say, you know, and they're quite honest about it. And that, I really respect that. But other people, you know, kind of shake their head and think, well, no, you know, you know, it's the way it is. But I don't know. I mean, I just think, you know, the statistics that I've got at the beginning of the film, you know, it says it's 6% or 8%. It's actually lower than that. It's got massively lower. It's probably around 3 or 4%. You know, working class people working in film and TV in 2024.
Wow. Yeah. What was the starting point? Once you sat down and go, right, I'm decided now I'm going to make this film.
Well, it was early last year when I'd finished the second feature, because I did a feature after a feature. So I did a feature documentary called Christian v Christian. It was probably, I was really tired, and then I don't know what it is, but I can't sit down and not do anything. So I probably started writing another script or something early spring 2023. And then, you know, I had conversations with my best friend that I mentioned, you know, that I talked about the class issue, and it was getting worse. It was getting worse. That's what I noticed. It was getting worse. And the reason why it was getting worse is because of these strikes. And more people were getting forced out of the industry. You know, and like I said before, the Hollywood system has, you know, really damaged our industry over here. And I just felt, yeah, I need to do another documentary. But wait a minute, how can I get it funded? And believe you me, I did try and get it funded. And, you know, it was complete rejections on all funding organizations. So I thought, you know what, this happened before when I made a film about my dad, you know, a death of my dad, sadly. And I want to explore the kind of bereavement side of things. And I was, you know, I was at the final hurdle, and it was a very well-known organization, and they turned me down. And I remember looking at them on the desk, and they said, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm just going to go and make the film." And their mouths were open. And I said, "You think you turning me down is going to stop me from making this film? No way." And I went, and it wasn't the best film, but it got, you know, it got kind of therapy for me. And I just felt it was really good to do that. So that's kind of where I went with this film that I'm currently doing just now about classism. Is I thought, well, it doesn't matter if they reject me because I'm going to still make the film.
Absolutely. That's something I'm like a massive advocate of as well as a filmmaker. That I always encourage people that, you know, because by choosing to go down that road of, you know, taking it more upon, you know, more into your own hands. I mean, of course, there's, you know, some pros and cons to that. Of course there is. But but what you are doing is you're taking the power back. You know, you're not just handing over the power whether or not your project can come to life to these people sat behind a desk. You know, suddenly the power is back within your hands. Once you make that decision, it's like, no, actually, all right, there's no budget and this means rethinking a few things, but I'm still going to press ahead of it. You've instantly taken the power back. And sometimes I do imagine that can come as quite a shock to these people, you know, that anyone would dare do it without their kind of input or say so, you know. So, you know, I totally get what you're saying with that. With regards to what you just touched on a second ago, because this is something I'm always interested in, and I know a lot of other filmmakers are as well. You just touched on there about trying to sort of raise funds and go down the area of funding for this documentary, but you met a lot of resistance. Is that something you can elaborate on a little bit more or not?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they ask for so much information. Sometimes they want to know, have you got an attached producer? Is the producer a fantastic producer? And it's just massive hurdles because most of the independent filmmakers that I know don't have, attached producers, but some of them now are starting to get them, which I'm really happy about. Um, yeah, I mean, the paperwork is unbelievable, or the digital form. It's there to put you off. You really need to get somebody to help you put it in. It's a massive job application is what it is. It was just really strange, the feedback. Sometimes you get no feedback. Sometimes you get, oh, well, we didn't see it as a strong thing. What was quite funny recently was that I was at a film festival in Folkestone, and I was sitting next to a fellow Scottish filmmaker who had got his project funded, and then I bumped into the same lady who I'd met from a funding organization. She says, "Oh, you should try applying." I says, "I did, but you turned me down." And the conversation stopped dead.
What would you say to those people out there who would listen to something, listen to what you've just said there, and say, "Yeah, but Mark, that's how these things. You have to do it in a professional way. If you want to do these things, that's how it happens. It has to be done with a lot of paperwork, with a lot of red tape, with people attached, with you have to like do it from this these things have to happen in a, like, as I say, in like a professional way." So what would you say to that kind of comment?
Well, I mean, I have got a solution for these organizations. The solution is that they don't judge classism part of the application process, and want to know which school I went to and which university, which I didn't go to. The other thing is they don't have to fully finance these films. They've got it in their head that they have to give hundreds of thousands of pounds to fund a film. My solution is that it's almost like a donation process. They come to yourself, Steve, or me, and they say, "What do you need to make this documentary or to make this film progress a bit?" "Oh, I need a hard drive. I need a camera lens." Those small little donations would be massive. I remember when I was buying, secondhand gear, and I was thinking the same thing. I've actually got a broken external monitor which I can't use, so I can't use two cameras now when I'm doing another interview. I can only use one, and it's going to cost like 500 quid, and I just haven't got that. So donations, or it would be massive for an independent filmmaker. And you know what? You could highlight them, and you could tag them in posts on social media. You could say, "Oh, thank you so much," and it's those little things that would make a massive difference. That's my answer.
So I've not seen your film, but I've read a lot of the posts that you've created surrounding it. But I've watched the trailer a few times now, actually, and the trailer's great. It definitely pulls you in and it wants you to know more about this whole thing. And by the looks of things, obviously within the trailer, from what I could see, you've managed to get a lot of people to go on camera and talk with you about this. People who are who work within the industry and are experienced of it, and so, which is like fantastic. How could you sort of touch on that a little bit more? How did you get those people involved in this project?
It's really difficult, to be honest with you. There's a lot of email exchange. Agents are not very nice people. At the end of the day, they are the gatekeepers. And if you meet a good agent that talks to you, then there's maybe 1 or 2% of them that exist. Some people wanted to do it, but I just couldn't afford to take the train up to Newcastle. I had amazing people lined up, and I just couldn't afford it. I had no money, and I ran out of money, and I wasn't working. Other people, you go to film festivals, you go to events, and you try to give people your card or your details and say, "I'm making this film." Again, 99% of the time it's rejection. So you got to factor that into every time you want to get someone involved. But it's people like Maxine Peake. She saw my work, and I did ask her why did she commit to an interview, and she was just very honest, and I really owe a lot to her. a human being and, you know, an actress or an actor. Not everybody's like that. You know, people don't want to sit down and talk about it. You know, they can talk about it at the Edinburgh TV Festival with all the celebrities that he had there, but, you know, what's that going to do? You know, they have to make some serious changes.
With regards to sort of the class divide within the film industry, does that also cross over into sort of like people in front of the camera, also other aspects and other positions behind the camera, not just the director, you know, but all the other positions that, you know, go into making a film and being on set? Is it like across the board with this issue?
Yeah, it is across the board. It really depends on how you navigate it. I mean, there are some few famous working class filmmakers that are very busy on social media, and I can see what they're posting because I follow them. But yeah, it's across the board. It's not just filmmakers, directors, it's actors as well. You know, there's an experience in my film where an actor talks about a casting experience. I don't want to say too much about it, but it's existed for a long time. You know, the way people look down on people. The thing that really shocks me to the core is that you can be looked down upon for your accent. You know, and I didn't know that. I thought to myself, well, I love accents and I like hearing accents, and I find it inspiring when I hear somebody's accent. I'm like, oh, they become memorable to me. But some people can look at it as a negative.
Yeah, they're called snobs.
You know? Yeah, they're called snobs. And that is covered in my film. You know, that is covered in my film. There's a few shocking things in there. Maybe they're not shocking to anybody, but they're shocking to me.
So how have you been finding, I mean, this is an obvious question, but could you sort of touch on, because you mentioned earlier about this being like one of the hardest years of your life from a financial point of view and a work point of view. So how, I mean, this is almost like a silly question to ask because I know, but could you elaborate a bit more on like how you've been finding that with that aspect of things and also chipping away at making this documentary that you're making? Because it's so weird, isn't it? Sometimes it's like when you get this passion project you're in, you know, it's like weirdly has to coincide with like one of the worst financial periods of your life as well at the same time. You know, I've experienced that as well on projects and things. It's like, why, you know, it's almost like, why does that have to be like that? Why can't I just suddenly make this film once I'm sort of in a much better financial position? Why does it always have to be the other way?
No, I know what you mean. It's I posted on LinkedIn and I basically said that this feels like pandemic part 2 for me, because it's a real struggle to get work, full-time work. And, you know, I've had to do, you know, dog sitting, dog walking, you know, in order to pay cash and things like that. And, you know, with my partner. And it just hasn't been easy. And I've forced myself to go out there to get the cutaways, to get the B-roll around the interviews. And then I kept chipping away, trying to somebody on board from ITV or BAFTA, you know, and it's just being persistent and trying to believe in yourself, even though you don't feel that the chips have landed the right way, as they say, in 2024. I don't know. There's no other way to put it, Steve. I don't know. It's just trying to believe that there is a story here, you know, and I fully, you know, understand, you know, that we're in a recession and hopefully 2025 is going to pick up. But that's what they've been saying for the whole year this year, that the industry is going to pick up. But, you know, there's a lot of people out of work just now. And I've found that if you got to have a hobby, you've got to have something creative that you do. Yeah, and it could be going outside, walking a dog, or it could be playing tennis or something. I don't know, playing football. But, you know, if I didn't have this project running in the background, then I think my mental state wouldn't be that great, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's such a weird kind of dynamic, because on one hand, I agree, it's like, you know, you need this other thing, in those periods, you need something else to focus on and have a creative outlet and stuff like that, you know, which can obviously massively help get you out of like these kind of bouts of depression and negativity and stuff, something to focus on. But at the same time, it's very easily, those lines can become so easily blurred, can't they? Because you can also find yourself letting that project just suck you into a point where you're just totally kind of like, everything else becomes a bit of, you start to neglect everything else because of this project. I mean, have you found that has been the kind of the case, that, it's like become an obsession, this project, to the point where on one hand it's a good thing because it's something that can sort of, spur you on to get you up in the morning, but on the other hand it could also be like a negative thing because it becomes an obsession?
Yeah, I definitely sympathize with that statement that you've said. Yeah, my partner, my girlfriend, will definitely say that I'm completely obsessed with this project. But I don't know. I felt, that my first two features, even though they got into festivals, they didn't really go where they're supposed to go. And now, since I've got into this more serious subject matter, I find that, I'm getting a lot of, support online, and it's just, it's overwhelming. It basically tells me I should have done this years ago, that I should have got a bit more political, and connect with people. But I'm really grateful to the people that have reached out to me online, especially LinkedIn. It's been huge. And I am consumed and obsessed with it. And I do normally 2 edits a day. And I'm coming to the end of hopefully the film and the final edit, but I'm just waiting to tweak a little bit at the end because I've got a test screening in a few weeks' time.
So did you say that you've been working on this actual documentary for the best part of, did you say 17 months? So
Yeah,
obviously
17.
with yourself, you're shooting it, you're editing it, you're producing it, you're lining up all the people that you want to get involved to appear on camera and interview. So you're just, doing everything. But how have you found navigating the other things around that at the same time, which are very easy to miss, with regards to, for example, marketing, distribution, finding where it's going to go, talking to people to help you get the word out, building an audience and things. Because, from a filmmaker, more often than not, filmmakers' brains are not wired to think of those particular things, but they're like big things you can miss, and then along the way. So have you been doing anything on that front with those things or not?
I'm glad you touched up on that. Yeah, I'm not the greatest person at marketing and trying to get the word out there, but social media has helped. I'm not the best social media analyst, but I try to learn these things as we go along. Going to film festivals has been kind of where I've met a lot of people and they've given me advice. And that's kind of where I've met people. I've met quite a few people at festivals and they're in my film.
So throughout this sort of long period of you making this film, what would you say has been sort of the unexpected things to have come out of it so far that you didn't predict?
I didn't predict that the people at the top didn't want to talk about it. The organizations, the people that say they support the film industry, that support working class, you'd be surprised. The people at the top don't want to talk about it. And that really surprised me, even though I've been trying for a whole year to try and get an interview. And, apparently they're too busy for a 1 hour sit down interview. That really surprised me.
So with this documentary, what would be your ideal outcome for this? What would, if you could cherry pick something, what would be the ideal outcome for you with this project?
Great question. There's so many.
I'm sure.
I suppose the outcome would be to get people to debate about it at festivals or go on a panel, and then just debate it and talk about it. I think and it start to sort of unfold around the country. If we're talking about my film, I just think maybe hopefully getting into a big festival like Sheffield Doc Fest, that would be something I've always dreamed of getting a film into, because I love the films that go into that festival. And even some of the smaller ones, that support documentaries, like the Folkestone Documentary Festival. It's good connecting with other filmmakers, and you're going to meet all different types of people, and that can only be a good thing.
What would you say to those people who would look at something like this whole issue, the class divide within the film industry and stuff, and people from certain backgrounds, well, people from, lower income working class backgrounds not getting the same opportunities? What would you say to those people who would say something along the lines of, well, it's a hard industry. If you really want to make it, you could make it if you really wanted to make it. You just work hard enough and you chip away at it, and and you're just looking for excuses. It's just excuses. That's an excuse of why you've not made it in the industry, using this as, coming out with things like there's a class divide or this or that. That's an excuse for not getting in.
Ultimately, the delusional is what they are. Oh, they're not realizing, well, they probably are realizing they just don't want to rock the boat. Most of the organizations don't want to rock the boat, and I've approached them all.
Sometimes it makes me think, how much of this issue with, the class division and stuff in the film industry, but how much of it could also come down to working class people changing their whole kind of mindset when it comes to something like that, to switching it more to actually, no, I can do this can be done.
Well, yeah, that's what most of the top working class filmmakers have done. They've done that. That's exactly what they've done. They've trained themselves. They've got advice. There's I don't want to reveal it, but there's a very poignant moment in the film which talks about a very famous filmmaker that's had the help to get into the industry. That's all you need. You need somebody to, support you in this industry. It's not meant to be we're not meant to make films by ourselves, by the way. It's a team effort. It's a collaborative effort. We're meant to work with highly talented individuals, and there are so many highly talented individuals out there.
Since you've gone down this road and you've been on this, path and so embedded in this as a whole, have you come across any positives within the industry or anywhere else, of any kind of places where this kind of thing has been highlighted more, or is being spoken about, or has there been any positives that you've noticed surrounding this along the way?
I think some people want to talk about it, like Maxine Peake and and Paul Laverty, who's in the film as well. And it's really nice when an organization like BAFTA, and I'm sure there is a lot of people that are very from connected backgrounds, but I was really impressed that BAFTA wanted to talk about it, and they are trying to do something to do about the industry. So that kind of resonated with me. Bectu, who I'm a member of, by the way, they've been really supportive. They're in the film as well, the trade union for the film and TV people. They're very supportive, as are a lot of people at Bectu are watching what I'm doing. That's been a lot of the positives. Probably getting feedback from one of the latest edits from a well-known producer, because I'm not a very arrogant, I'm not one of these arrogant filmmakers that I do meet from time to time where they think everything they make is fantastic. Oh my God, this is just the best. Because I edit my own film, because I film it, I make it by myself. I'm too close to it. Therefore, I don't know if it's actually any good, until I show it to a friend, and then sometimes they don't give me the best advice. So I have to show it to somebody who doesn't know me as a friend, like this person that I've met recently, and they've said, this is something. And I was like, really? Because, you just need that validation. I knew the subject matter would be something that people want to talk about, but I just didn't know if the film's any good.
Well, I mean, this is me speaking to you as a filmmaker as much as anything. But would you say that from a filmmaking point of view, sometimes people's best work does come when they have to think outside the box and they don't have everything kind of handed to them on the plate, or they're not getting the breaks that they that they might necessarily deserve or want at a certain point. Would you say that, you know, sometimes filmmakers' work can come when there are a lot of hurdles to get over and stuff? You know, the more interesting things can result from that in a weird roundabout way, and not getting help from, say, the industry.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I mean, I'm really proud of my second feature, which was completely shot by me. It's a feature doc. My first feature had a crew of 5, and I did quite a bit of the camera work on that. It wasn't really representing my class, my first feature. It was kind of a story that I felt that I had to write. You know, even making this film, I thought about giving up every day, because of the rejection of no job, no interview, you know, no money, you know, not just the funding, just rejection is a constant thing. You know, even today I got rejection for a job interview, you know, and that's kind of left me a bit speechless. Um, you know, I do think about giving up every day, and it's that's the reality of an independent filmmaker who's not financed. You know, you battle with your demons, you know, and I think being part of a union like Back2 has helped as well. You know, because you know they're all from different backgrounds, but they've been really supportive of what I've been doing. And you know, organizations like the Film and TV Charity, again, being very supportive, you know, and not being able to pay the rent, and you know, organizations like that stepping in to help me, you know, it's just been amazing. And yeah, it wouldn't be a film without them if I didn't have that support from them, you know, mentally and financially.
And just sort of to wrap things up, is there anything you feel like we've not touched on, or I've not asked, or there's other things you want to mention or you talk about, or anything at all?
Just that the organizations at the top know who they are, and they need to come together in sort of unity and make it a more inclusive industry, because they've been trying to do something about it and failing. They need to come together and you know, just make it a fairer system, because right now it isn't a fairer system. And you know, again, the funding process needs to be overhauled. You know, the grants and the funding, that completely needs to be overhauled.
And when you say those at the top, like who are these institutions and things that can make such kind of like drastic changes? Like, where would that come from? The
I
government?
mean, it's in my film. Yeah. No, not the government. It's in my film.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it's in my film. I mean, I can name them, but it is in my film. But it's again, you know, it's not because I'm trying to disrupt things. I'm trying to evolve things. I'm trying to continue. Because there's a lot of people that have left this industry because they feel that they've been rejected, everything. They feel like they've not had any support, and I'm one of those people, by the way. And it's horrible, you know, closing the door on something that you love doing. And yeah, we've lost a lot of good people this year. That there's many filmmakers, directors working on building sites. Not that building sites are horrible, but they're just doing jobs that is completely not creative. They're working in post offices. They've closed the door on the industry because the industry's closed the door on them.
So for people who are watching this, hopefully watching this, where could they find out more about you and more about your documentary?
Probably, well, on my Vimeo, it's Mark Forbes, filmmaker, and then my Instagram, Scott's Filmmaker, and then on LinkedIn, Mark Forbes. That's where I've really built a massive community, which has just come out of nowhere, because everybody thinks Facebook and Instagram are fabulous, but LinkedIn's been massive for me. It's been really, you know, about maybe 5 weeks ago, I had 498 LinkedIn contacts. I now have 1,028. And that's because of this film, because I've really connected with an audience, and LinkedIn's been huge. So big tip for filmmakers get onto LinkedIn. It's been really positive.
Well, look, Mark, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it. And I really, from what I've not seen the full film, and I'm looking forward to seeing it once it's finished and everything. But from what I've seen so far, I definitely feel like you've tapped into something there that can resonate with a lot of people. It's obviously growing some momentum, and stuff, and lots more other people, are discovering it and expressing interest in it. And big well done to where you've even got it to so far, because I know how hard it is. I know especially when you're doing it without a budget, by yourself, and you're also trying to live life and pay bills and things. And I know like how challenging and how tough that can be. So I sincerely hope you get what you want to get out of it, and it does go on to do what you want it to do, and I'm sure it will start some conversations and resonate with a lot more people once you start getting it out there,
Thanks very much, Steve. It's thanks very much for highlighting the issue, of the classism of the film industry. It's people like yourself that want to discuss it, because there is a lot of people out there that don't want to discuss it, and that's what makes it refreshing, you talking to me today.
Thanks again for today. Massively appreciate it, and hopefully we'll sort of catch up soon,
You're very welcome, Steve. Thank you very much.